unfortunately, you got muted. So
there we go. Sorry about that. I was just trying to get the recording started there. So we've got that going, and we are on page 19 of the big book. We are going to start about halfway down, which is just a tiny bit before where we left off yesterday, which is we have concluded. Rob?
okay, page 19, everybody. We have concluded to publish an anonymous volume setting forth the problem as we see it. We shall bring to the task our combined experience and knowledge. This should suggest a useful program for anyone concerned with the drinking problem.
Okay, one of the things I want to make a note of here is that this is a common problem, and this is not my personal problem. It is our program problem, and it is also their problem, which is what we is referring to as the first 100 or so that helped write this book or contributed to the reasons why the book was written. And the second part here to this is that this book is, as this chapter indicates, is that it is a common solution. So that's kind of what we're going to get started. So a common problem and a common solution. Rob?
And that's the combined knowledge and experience of the first 100. Of necessity, there will have to be discussion of matters medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. We are aware that these matters are, from their very nature, controversial. Nothing would please us so much as to write a book which would contain no basis for contention or argument. We shall do our utmost to achieve that ideal. Most of us sense that real tolerance of other people's shortcomings and viewpoints and a respect for their opinions are attitudes which makes us more useful to others. Our very lives as ex-prone drinkers depend upon our constant thoughts of others and how we may help meet their needs.
Okay, and meeting other people's needs is really where we end up, as the program suggests, and that is to take this message and this program to other alcoholics. At the same time, there is going to be some discussion, as a matter of fact, of medical, psychiatric, social, and religious. And we realize that there's a lot of controversy out there with regard to any of those topics, let alone with what we have in Alcoholics Anonymous. So one of the things that you guys have, some of you already know, is that we don't give interpretations here, and it's not Leo's opinion of stuff. We do everything we can to be as black and white and project the reason this book was written, and the very things in this book are the facts that we actually put out there. And so hopefully our controversy or anything that might be of objection to folks will be at a minimum, because we focus so much so 100% here, as if you will, on this book and the program that is outlined in the book. So just wanted to kind of put that out as we go forward. Rob?
You know, I love the fact that our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. You know, you hear sometimes in meetings or in the fellowship that it's a selfish program. Where in this book, by helping others, is it selfish? It's constantly, as we read through the book, look for certain things that are going to be said over and over and over again in different ways, but it's the same idea. Helping others is a cornerstone of our program. So I don't see selfishness. You may already have asked yourself, why is it that all of us became so very ill from drinking? Doubtless you are curious to discover how and why, in the face of expert opinion to the contrary, we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body. If you are an alcoholic who wants to get over it, you may already be asking, what do I have to do?
Okay, a couple of things here. Excuse me. There is an initial mention, and we will get into this, of the hopeless condition of mind and body. If you all will know and will hear multiple times as we go through this, there are two symptoms of being an alcoholic, and that is the allergy and the malady. Allergy being the physical and malady being of the mind. And the other part of this is that When any time that they project a question or ask a question in here, they always have the answer. So there's nobody left to guess in this point. So what do I have to do? Well, guess what? They're going to answer that and then some throughout the next few pages of this book. So just so you know, you never are left out there hanging when a question is asked in this book. Rob?
And I also love the fact that we have recovered from a hopeless condition of mind and body, the two symptoms. It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. We shall tell you what we have done. Before going into a detailed discussion, it may be well to summarize some points as we see them. How many times people have said to us, I can take it or leave it alone. Why can't he? Why don't you drink like a gentleman or quit? That fellow can't handle his liquor. Why don't you try beer and wine? Lay off the hard stuff. His willpower must be weak. He could stop if he wanted to. She's such a sweet girl. I should think he'd stop for her sake. The doctor told him that if he ever drank again, it would kill him. But there he is, all lit up again.
Absolutely. And so there's a lot packed into just that right there. One is that I know for a fact that I have actually asked myself some of these questions. Maybe the words are slightly different, but the questions are still there. And, you know, why is it that I can't drink like a gentleman? And I'm not going to drink hard liquor, so I'm going to stick to beer, or I'm going to stick to wine, etc. And the frustration that comes with that. But what this is really trying to, at least for now, tell you is that there are a lot of folks out there that don't understand alcoholism. And I'm not just talking about the alcoholics that haven't been introduced to this program and the solution of recovery. I'm talking about the people that are around the alcoholic, whether that be family member, friends, colleagues, etc. You're going to find that most people that have not been a part of this program, one, two, are introduced to it, or two, are not alcoholic, are not going to understand why we have no control over this. Remember, we are powerless over alcohol. All right. So that is a distinction that makes us alcoholic, and it's the distinction that makes us different from other people. And they just don't get how much we want to either try and drink like others, which is one of the obsessions, and we'll learn about that, which we cannot do. And two, once we get started, we can't stop. And people just don't understand why that is. Why is it that we get thirstier? So there's a lot saying here. This is really the kind of, in the smallest of nutshells, the frustration and the problems that we face with other people around us. And it's part of what generates the frustration in other people. They're looking at us asking this question: why can't you just stop? You've had enough. Don't you know, enough is enough? And you're actually saying to yourself, why can't I stop? I don't know why I can't stop. But that's really what's in this. And what we've got to try to draw from this is that, one, our own education is of the utmost importance, but educating others around us is also just as important and just as powerful. The more people around the alcoholic understand alcoholism and understand the problem of the allergy and the malady, the more that they're going to either assist, the more patience they have, the more latitude they give the alcoholic to try and recover. So I just put that out there. This particular passage gets referred to a lot because of the reference that we have and need for other explanations throughout the book. But we come back to this time and again, that people just don't understand, not just the alcoholic that hasn't been introduced to the program, but the other people around them. Bob?
The other part that I love, Leo, is that, it asks the question, what do I have to do? It is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. They're not going to answer it in a roundabout way. They're going to tell us exactly how they do it, specifically, precisely. These words, just hit home. They're going to tell us exactly what they did in order to get sober. Do I want their story? Of course I want it, because I've tried quitting on my own and it hasn't worked. A lot of people around me, they say, you know, it's human behavior problem. You know, he'd quit if he wanted to. He doesn't want to. Yeah. They don't know the hell that some of us have gone through in order to try to get rid of this disease. You know,
I agree.
the mental torture we've gone through, the mental anguish, you know, the banging, you know, our heads against the wall going, why can't I stop? You know, Bill, we read Bill's story. Fear sobered Bill up for a short period of time. What was the fear? That he was going to die an alcoholic death. But did that keep him sober? No. Kept him sober for a very short period of time. Then what happens? Suddenly he finds himself picking up a drink again. Now, these are commonplace observations on drinkers, which we hear all the time. Back of them is a world of ignorance and misunderstanding. We see that these expressions refer to people whose reactions are very different from ours.
Yep, and we're getting, and that just kind of backstops what both Rob and I just talked about. And what we're going to do here is we're going to get into the different types of drinkers, if you will, and we're going to kind of try to define what a real alcoholic is. So just kind of listen in on where these people are and the differences between what a moderate drinker is compared to a real alcoholic. I'm surprised too, just as a point of reference for me, which we won't talk about, but I'm surprised they don't have the light drinker, the person that, you know, just occasionally will take, you know, a ceremonial glass of champagne or, you know, a particular glass of wine with dinner just to enhance, you know, the flavors, if you will, of what they're eating or something like that. But outside of anything like that, they don't pick up alcohol at all. And it's kind of a, you know, those are people that I think I would just say that are kind of frustrating to us real alcoholics, because it's kind of like, I can't believe that all you have to do is take the drink of wine with that particular paired meal, and then from there you get to switch to a new, you know, something else to eat, and you know, push the other glass of wine, and then they give you a different glass of wine, whatever that might be. I'm you know, but you guys can get the message or get the idea of what I'm talking about with regards to these what I would characterize as a light drinker, almost a non-drinker, just somebody that you know, does it ceremoniously. Anyway, Rob, let's go ahead and get dug in on the different types of drinkers.
Okay, moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up liquor entirely if they have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. He may have the habit badly enough to gradually impair him physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate. Although he may find it difficult and troublesome, he may even need medical attention.
Okay, so there's a couple of different types of drinkers here. These are normal, what we call the normal drinker or the normal person. We refer to ourselves as the not normal types of drinkers because of the fact that we can't stop. But the moderate drinkers out there are people that, you know, drink socially. They obviously can, you know, take it or leave it alone at any time for any reason, no matter how big or small. They can walk away from it and never be fazed by it. I've got, you know, my wife throughout my now sobriety, my period of sobriety, just out and out just chose as part of being supportive, just decided to stop drinking, and that's exactly what's happened. In fact, the only time she's drank is at Thanksgiving. Within the last year, a friend of hers came over, brought a bottle of wine, and throughout an entire day, they ended up splitting a bottle of wine. But that's the only thing that we've had to drink. There's actually alcohol in the house. It's been there forever, and she just doesn't feel the need to do so. The heavy drinker, and I think that part of us can say that we were at one point maybe a moderate drinker, and then we actually graduated into being a heavy drinker. But those are folks that are obviously going to drink quite regularly, and from time to time they're going to drink excessively. But they are in fact able, with sufficient need, to stop They can, in fact, and this is part of the progression of our disease, you can start out as a moderate drinker earlier in life, and then as the disease progresses, become a heavy drinker, and then from there you find yourself kind of in full grips of the disease and find yourself being a real alcoholic. But the thing that really differentiates these two types of drinkers from a real alcoholic is the fact that they can stop for whatever reason with sufficient need. That's it. That's all they need, and they can stop. So just as we get through this, I think it's just important to kind of make that distinction.
You know, Leo, the other day I saw something on Facebook, and the idea was that some lady was doing a recipe, and the recipe called for leftover wine, and she's going, "What is leftover wine?"
Right.
We're on page 21, everybody. But what about the real alcohol? He may start off as a moderate drinker. He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink.
Okay, so a couple of things. We're getting into the definition of a real alcoholic, and I think it is just important to kind of make some of these distinctions here. You know, you're going to find some that you relate to this completely as an alcoholic, but one of and it goes back to our point is that it is the purpose of this book to answer such questions specifically. So what is a real alcoholic? Well, we're going to tell you, and that's what they're doing. So just so you know, you don't have to come up with the answer on your own. Rob?
And here's another really important remark that they put in. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of the liquor consumption once he starts to drink. That's when the allergy kicks in, once we start to drink. And I love the fact that they put career, that, you know, drinking is a career for us. It's our profession. If only we could make money at it. Here is the fellow who has been puzzling you, especially in his lack of control. He does absurd, incredible, tragic things while drinking. He is a real Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He is seldom mildly intoxicated. He is always more or less insanely drunk. His disposition while drinking resembles his normal nature but little. He may be one of the finest fellows in the world, yet let him drink for a day, and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. He has a positive genius for getting tight at exactly the wrong moment, particularly when some important decision must be made or engagement kept. He is often perfectly sensible and well balanced concerning everything except liquor, but in that respect, he is incredibly dishonest and selfish.
We'll stop just a second there, Rob. A couple of things I want to kind of highlight here is yet let him drink for a day and he frequently becomes disgustingly and even dangerously antisocial. You know, it does. And when we talk about this Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, you know, some people are kind of quiet and reserved when they're not drinking, and then they get to be loud and boisterous when they do. Other people, you know, may be kind of outgoing and pleasant when they're not drinking, and then get to be broody and kind of belligerent in a sense. And really, when they talk about this antisocial, it's just they get to be, you know, and they use a great word. They're disgusting. You know, it's just that they, you know, they're slurring, they're hanging on, they're saying things that they wouldn't normally say, and it just gets to the point that it's a real problem. And you know, when they talk about this being dishonest and selfish, I mean, it's just incredible what some people will, in fact, try and do and say when they're under the influence of alcohol. And for us, we're talking about heavily under the influence of alcohol. And so I just want to kind of highlight that before we get too far into this paragraph as we keep going and stuff. So anyway, Rob?
He often possesses special abilities, skills, and aptitudes, and has a promising career ahead of him. He uses his gifts to build up a bright outlook for his family and himself, and then pulls the structure down on his head by a senseless series of sprees. He is the fellow who goes to bed so intoxicated he ought to sleep the clock around. Yet early next morning, he searches madly for the bottle he must place the night before. If he can afford it, he may have liquor concealed all over his house to be certain no one gets his entire supply away from him to throw down the waste pipe. As matters grow worse, he begins to use a combination of high-powered sedative and liquor to quiet his nerves so he can go to work. Then comes the day when he simply cannot make it and gets drunk all over again. Perhaps he goes to a doctor who gives him morphine or some sedative with which to taper off. Then he begins to appear at hospitals and sanitariums.
All right, so what we're doing is we're watching a discussion here with the book, and it's basically describing the progression of the disease. And from there, it's also talking about how bad things get, what are some of the consequences and the ramifications of drinking. The fact is, we have people that are bright, they're intelligent, they're successful, and they do good work, they do good things, they have great families, they've got great, living conditions and that sort of thing. Yet you put a bottle of alcohol in front of them, no matter we're talking a beer, a glass of wine, a glass of dark liquor, something like that, and they actually just go off the deep end, and they fall into this bad place, and they let it control them. They let it control their behaviors, their attitudes, and the things that they've built up around them. Yep, they come crashing down around them. The friends and family start to distance themselves from them. If they miss work, it starts to impact their ability to be productive and earn some type of living. In addition to that, they find themselves at a point where their appearance starts to degrade, their health might start to degrade, and you would think that any of those things would be enough motivation for them to stop their drinking, but it isn't. It just isn't. The other thing too is that they make some declarations here. One of which is where if he can afford it, alcohol isn't that expensive anymore. I mean, I know it is, there is some expense, and certainly you have to make some investment into it, but there are ways to get into some very cheap alcohol. And I know that from experience, but also in what they do bring up, which hits close to home for me, and it may for some of you, is that you may have liquor concealed all over the house to be certain no one gets the entire supply. And if you think about that, my hiding place was my garage. I just had too many good places to put some bottle of something away, so that even if somebody came in and took the bottle that was sitting in the kitchen on the counter and poured it out in the sink, and how many of us have been there where an entire bottle of whatever you have is being poured down the sink to try and make some kind of declaration that either I'm going to stop or somebody else is trying to keep me from drinking, which is never successful. Bottom line is I was what you call a hider. I hid my alcohol, and part of that was because I would have a drink and I would have a second drink hidden someplace, or I might even have a third drink hidden in another place. But I knew that if I had access to alcohol, I had it figured out so that I was going to get through a minimum of 4 drinks, if not more, depending on the amount of alcohol I had, but I had them hidden around so that you might think all I'm doing is drinking 2 drinks, but I was really drinking 4 or 5 drinks. Now I say that tongue in cheek because almost every time, regardless of whether I believed you knew it or not, you knew I was drinking more than I was supposed to. But this is obviously a very common behavior of alcoholics, and that is and it's one of, I think, that I helped myself to determine that I was alcoholic, was the fact that I was hiding my drinking. That's a real problem. If you're in the position of hiding your alcohol and drinking excessively in that regard, you are definitely in a position where you should consider as to whether or not you're alcoholic. And it just gets worse. I was fortunate in that I didn't have medication on top of alcohol in an effort to get to that condition that I wanted to be in, albeit I was taking medication, and some of you have heard that story, to calm my tremors and my nerves. So I was basically masking my withdrawals from alcohol. But that was a different story. But anyway, some people do, in fact, get to the point where they are taking things in order to just function. And I know that I've heard story after story of people having to drink in the morning just to get to a point where they felt normal and could actually function. So anyway, and nowadays, instead of technically a hospital or sanitarium, we're talking about recovery, places of recovery that people are going to. But man, there's just a lot. There's just so much packed into this chapter alone, but it's so good at the way that they describe the solution that we have in here, and what goes into, first of all, what is an alcoholic, and that's really what's being described here for all of us to kind of learn from. Rob?
I love the fact that, we can tie this back to page 3 of Bill's story, where Bill became a lone wolf and he made a lot of fair weather friends. I can take it back to my own drinking, where I started to isolate. I wanted to be by myself, because then I could drink as much as I wanted, whenever I wanted. I didn't have to worry about
people. Yeah, you didn't have people giving you a hard time about it. It was like, if they just leave me alone, I'll be fine. Just stop nagging me,
I was in the doctor's opinion. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. They care about you. They want you to stop. Do you really need another drink? Yeah, I do. But you can't say that, so you try to smile and you try to be nice, but you just want to push everybody away. Just leave me alone so I can drink as much as I want when I want. So we're on page 22, everybody. This is by no means a comprehensive picture of the true alcoholic, as our behavior patterns vary, but this description should identify him roughly. Why does he behave like this? If hundreds of experiences have shown him that one drink means another debacle, with all its attendant suffering and humiliation, why is it that he takes that one drink? Why can't he stay on the water wagon? What has become of the common sense and willpower that he still sometimes displays with respect to other matters?
Yeah, and that is really where we are here in terms of talking a bit about the malady, and that is that, why can't you stay away from that first drink? Why does he take that one drink? And that one drink is what kicks things off. And I will tell you that is one of the symptoms that we deal with, but it is so true, no matter what. And I was drinking, and I'll just tell you that the moment the alcohol touched my lips, I felt a level of regret, remorse, and guilt. It just overwhelmed me. And it was no fun. There was nothing fun about it. But here I was yet again, knowing that I'm going to get, somebody's going to say something's going to happen that I'm going to cause, and that I'm going to make worse, and ultimately will become this quote debacle. And yet there I was doing it again, knowing I knew better, but I just couldn't not take that first drink. Rob?
What has become of my common sense and my willpower? I simply didn't know. Perhaps there never will be a full answer to these questions. Opinions vary considerably as to why the alcoholic reacts differently from normal people. We are not sure why, once a certain point is reached, little can be done for him. We cannot answer the riddle.
Yep. And that's just a good way of basically saying that, there is a good answer here. I'm going to say that, there will never be a full answer to these questions. I feel very confident in myself in that I know what my problem is based on what I've read out of this book, but I also know that there are others out there that feel like that there's much more to it than what's in this book, and that maybe this book doesn't quite have all the answers. And sure, nobody has all the answers, and you could what if this to death. But the point being is that it's a pretty good darn description of what we've got that ails us, and the problem that we have. But once a certain point is reached, and that's a broad statement. Once a certain point is reached, whether that be the condition that you're in, the amount of alcohol that's around you, the fact that you take that first drink after trying to white knuckle it, if you will, to the point of once you've taken that first drink and you're already into your fifth or sixth drink, there's just certain things that are happening. But what I'm trying to get at here is that once a certain point at any phase in the spectrum of alcoholism, little can be done for this person. And we can't answer the riddle. Yeah, it's a bit baffling, and we're going to talk about that. But I think they do a pretty good job of getting pretty close of answering what most of our problem really is. Rob?
We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men. We're equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop. The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this.
Yeah, and they do say something. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from the drink, as he may do for months or years, it's been my experience, and I have actually been able to stay away from alcohol for months at a time, and that was usually because of my chosen vocation in the Marine Corps. I was put into a situation where I was not supposed to drink, and so therefore I followed the rules and I didn't drink. And I would go for months a few times in my life. I did go for months without drinking. As soon as I got back to it, I always remember there was this weird kind of feeling that I had when I first started drinking that first quote beer or whatever it might be, after having been off of it for about 6 or 7 months. But I remember how odd it felt, and then also how quickly it felt like putting on that old sweatshirt and that old pair of jeans that we all love to kind of sink into. And the next thing you know, I had forgotten about my kind of awkwardness of being around alcohol after being away from it for 6 or 7 months, and how much of an old friend it became. And there I was, basically drinking and drinking to excess. It's amazing at how fast an alcoholic can get right back into the problem side of drinking. And not only that, but it is definitely a progressive disease. And the older I got, the worse it got. And whether you want to argue that, your metabolism slows down and therefore your ability to, process alcohol, is there, or it's just that it just continually gets worse. But if you think that by staying off of it for so many months or even years, and I applaud you, if you're an alcoholic and able to stay off of it for years without doing this program, that's great. I'm not, and there's no, it's just a fact. But if you decide you're going to go back to it, and we'll read a story in here about a person that did exactly that. And when they got back, they basically, their disease had progressed to the point that it basically killed them within 4 years. So anyway, it's there. It doesn't go away, and unfortunately, we are plagued by it. And there's really, in my opinion, this is the solution, and that's how to get away from it. All right. Rob?
We're at the top of page 23, and the next sentence is one of the most important things that we're going to read. These observations would be academic and pointless if our friend never took that first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion.
Okay.
Therefore,
well, go ahead.
Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body.
And Rob, what are we talking about here? I mean, if we were to distill this down to its basic thing, what is it that we're saying about the alcoholic?
That he has a problem. It's a malady of the mind. That he can't stop himself from taking that first drink.
Right. And if he didn't take that first drink, would he be alcoholic?
Oh, he would never set the terrible cycle in motion.
Right. So
we're thereby having the allergy take effect.
Well, and I think too, yeah. And what I'm trying to say is here in the very beginning is that if you don't take that first drink ever, say it's a 19-year-old or a 24-year-old or a 16-year-old, or in some cases even younger, but if you don't take that first drink, you can't suffer from the effects of alcoholism and stuff. So part of being an alcoholic is you got to drink in order to be an alcoholic. Okay. So just want to make that distinction there. And this terrible cycle, it is just terrible. Once it starts and it just goes, and we all have our own personal stories about how desperate we become for that next drink, that next bottle, etc.
If you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis. Sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility, but none of them really make sense in the light of the havoc an alcoholic drinking bout creates. They sound like the philosophy of a man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache. If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk.
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. You know, when you ask him if what he started on that last bender, the chances are he'll offer you any one or 100 of alibis. You know, work just got the best of me. You know, my dog died. Somebody wronged me, whether or not they borrowed a lawnmower and broke it and then and just gave it back and refused to pay for the whatever. Any number of instances within our lives that have caused us some kind of pain or anguish or anger or frustration, we will use as the best excuse, meaning that there is a very good reason why I'm drinking. It's because I'm trying to, drown my woes, if you will. And all it does, and I would say this to almost a person, but you can decide on your own. But if I was to say, does drinking make the fact that you have lost a girlfriend or a boyfriend, does it make it better? And if you're being honest, and that's me saying this, is if I'm being honest, no, it doesn't make it better. But we're going to use the excuse of a loss or a problem and something in our lives to take a drink. Really, what is the true thing is we just can't help ourselves. We're going to drink no matter what. You might also drink this last debacle because of something great that happened. Maybe you won a lottery and got a few $100s, or maybe something really good happened at work. You got this big promotion, or something happened, and maybe he or she said yes to whatever. And bottom line is that you were going to use any excuse you can in life to apply to your drinking, and it's really not that reason. You're just doing it so that you can try and this is me talking, but you can hide behind some event, good or bad, to support your drinking, when all you're really doing is your drinking. That's all it is. And sure, everybody seems to think, hey, we're going to clink glasses because we just got that big deal at work and it came through and we won, etc. But the bottom line is that you would have drank anyway. You were going to get drunk anyway. So, the real reason is you just can't help yourself. And that is, and when you're called on it, I think that's what they're trying to say at the end here. Either, you're going to laugh it off and try to make light of it, or you're going to become irritated and refuse to talk. You're going to become withdrawn. That was normally my attitude. If somebody called me out on my drinking, I tried to withdraw from them. I tried to get away from them. I would say something to try to drive them away, which all it did was make things worse. But that was more me in that regard, and found myself trying to be that lone wolf that Rob was referring to.
They're drinking against their will. They don't want to drink, but they're drinking, and they come up with excuse after excuse to try to justify it. Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday, they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count.
Yep. This is so one of the highlights here is once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. Fact is that when somebody asks you why you're drinking the way you are, most people, not everyone, but most people will answer that they really just don't know why they're drinking, and they will obviously say, I don't really want to do it, I just do it. People will look at you and say, yeah, right. You're telling me that you don't want to do it, but you're doing it anyway. If you don't want to do it, why don't you just stop? Well, the fact is you can't. And the other part here is that the obsession, this is one of two places in this book that talk about the obsession. And we're not talking about the obsession as a symptom of alcoholism. There is a misnomer, and it's usually mischaracterized. But this is what they're talking about, that when they somehow someday they will beat the game, meaning that they will be able to stop drinking completely. This is the obsession that you really do want to stop, but you're unable to. And we'll talk more about that as we get going down in other parts of this book. And, often suspect that they are down for the count. If we're hopeless, we've tried a whole bunch of different things, like I said before, beer instead of liquor, only drinking on Fridays and Saturdays, et cetera, et cetera. And none of that is working. We basically have no faith in the fact that we're going to be able to stop, and we don't stop. So anyway, Rob?
How true this is, few realize. In a vague way, their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal, but everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will.
Yeah, and that's just reinforcing what we've just talked about, that the people around you know well before you do that you have a problem. They're also at the beginning hopeful that you're going to stop. After a period of time, you can find that they also give up and lose hope as well. And when they do, they just basically think this person is finally going to wake up, come to terms with things, and just decide to stop. And, sure, they're going to stop. There are other addictions out there where it is just hard to stop, whether that be smoking, caffeine, sugar, anything out there. And I'm just the tip of the iceberg. But it is not an easy thing to do, to stop when you have got when alcohol has got this kind of control over you. You are powerless. So it's impossible. Rob?
Beyond human aid, the tragic truth is that if a man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. He has lost the power of control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. The tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected.
Yeah, and that just reinforces the fact that, you become alcoholic before you, one, realize that you're alcoholic, two, you actually want to acknowledge that you're alcoholic, and three, which is even more important, is that you admit not only to yourself, but to others that you're alcoholic. I mean, there are some phases, even as an alcoholic, you go through to try to come to terms with your drinking. And some people never get there. Unfortunately, we are talking about a serious disease here. And while we do laugh and carry on at times and everything, what we're dealing with is truly life or death, and it is very serious, and it is important to deal with. But basically what they're saying here is, by the time you realize that you're alcoholic, by the time you're willing to even acknowledge and admit it, you've been alcoholic for quite some time. And believe me, everybody around you has also realized the same. Rob?
Well, Leo, the next sentence or paragraph that I'm going to read is, to me, one of the best descriptions of the malady. And it must be important because they didn't have a lot of money when they were trying to get this book published. In fact, they had to borrow money like crazy trying to get this book done. When it came to them putting squiggly writing in there, or the italics, it cost them extra money. So it must be important. So we have to pay extra attention to it. So the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice and drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against a first drink.
Absolutely. Just a great way of basically summarizing the malady. You've lost the power of choice. You are unable at certain times to bring into your own consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even, and I'll even say of an hour ago, a day ago, a week ago, a month ago, etc. And you are without defense against the first drink. How true all of that is in describing the malady itself. And not much more to be said. It's just really clearly and distinctly made out. But it is important. I've not only highlighted this that that part, but I also underlined those very things that I just read to you as well.
Well, which takes us back to page 23. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than his body. Why? Because we were without defense against that first drink. Suddenly, we have that first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. The almost certain consequences that follow taking even a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. If the thoughts occur, they are hazy and readily supplanted with the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other people. There is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove.
Yeah, and sure, we learned that early on in life. I mean, a lot of us do, is don't touch that. And sure enough, we've touched it, and either it burns us, it bites us, it pokes us, or we break something. So don't want to do that again. And interestingly enough, is that you typically will learn to not do that again. But with drink, it's not the case. It just is not the case. And there is a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps us from putting his hand on a hot stove. Absolutely. There is just no defense against that first drink. And it's amazing at how easy and how baffling it gets when you actually look down after taking the first drink, the first glass, the first whatever, and you're sitting there saying to yourself, how the heck did I get here? Just how did I get here? Rob?
Yeah, I love how Bill always said, my brain wants its candy, and it will tell me anything in order to get that candy. My brain will tell me anything for me to take that first drink.
Absolutely.
Once that malady has got me to take that first drink, it's done its job. Then the allergy is going to take over, and now I can't control the amount I take. The brain is a powerful weapon. The alcoholic may say to himself in the most casual way, it won't burn me this time. So here's how. Or perhaps he doesn't think at all. How often have some of us begun to drink in this nonchalant way, and after the third or fourth, pounded on the bar and said to ourselves, for God's sakes, how did I ever get started again? Only to have that thought supplanted by, well, I'll stop with the sixth drink, or what's the use anyhow?
Yeah, and it's just frustrating. I for the longest time, I would admit to you that I wanted to drink, and I knew that I had a problem with it, not willing to admit that I was alcoholic. But there was, and it is actually at that point in time, I got to a point where I didn't want to drink. I looked around and I was like, look, I really don't want to drink. Why am I doing this? Why don't I care what other people think about it? And why am I not doing something? But once I get started, I would just say, to heck with it. I got the heckets, and I would just drink. So it's just amazing. And here's some more descriptions of the malady as you go along. And I want to remind you, alcohol has you. You don't have it. Okay. So this is going to be a good description as we get into this. This is actually saying that it has you. You don't have it.
When this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendency, he has proudly placed himself beyond human aid, and unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. These stark and ugly facts have been confirmed by legions of alcoholics throughout history. But for the grace of God, there would have been thousands more convincing demonstrations. So many want to stop, but cannot.
Yep. So many of us want to stop, and we're there, and we just cannot. So we're going to get into this, the last couple of paragraphs before we stop for the day. So, Rob, if you will, this is one that we refer back to time and time again. So just kind of as you walk through this, just pay careful attention here.
Quickly writing, people.
Yep.
There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed.
Absolutely. And that's just it. There is a solution. And they didn't, and I mean, they describe it to a certain extent, but we are going to go into great detail of this solution going forward. And they're not going to leave us hanging here. But almost none of us like the self-searching and the leveling of our pride and the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others. Okay, so we're talking about some steps here too. The solution really is as being described here, that you're going to have to dig down deep inside. You're going to have to do some work. You're going to have to level your pride, and you're going to have to, admit a few things. The confession of our shortcomings. That's a great statement for step 4. Which is the process requires and 5, I'm sorry, step 4 and 5 for its successful consummation. And being approached by those with whom the problem have been solved. I know that there are people out there that say that you never truly recover from alcoholism, but I am one of the people that believe in what the book says and what the program is and what this solution is saying, and that is that I have recovered from alcoholism. I will always be an alcoholic. But I have recovered from the hopeless state of mind and body, and have been able to solve the drink problem. So, and not only that, but when they talk about we found much of heaven and what has been rocketed into the 4th dimension, I think that those are varying degrees for people. Even those that have recovered have varying experiences with that. Everybody, I believe, that has truly recovered, that has followed this program, has had a spiritual experience, and we're not right at that point to talk about just yet, but we will go into that. But getting rocketed into that 4th dimension, I think I basically had to take a few flights of stairs to get there. It didn't happen all at once for me, but we'll talk about that even more as we come along. I think I'm going to, let's go ahead and read that last paragraph, Rob, and then we'll stop there for the day, and I'll let Bill kind of come in.
Okay, I just want to say one thing. One of the greatest lines that it's in the book. There was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. Why is it laid at our feet? Because it's up to us to pick it up and decide whether we want to go forward with it. The great fact is just this, nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude towards life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves.
Absolutely. And we're going to pick up on next week with that very paragraph and dig into that a whole lot deeper. But I do want to make sure that people are kind of closing out today and setting ourselves up for next week. But we have this spiritual experience that we will define in more detail next week. It has, in fact, changed us in ways that are permanent. And once you've had that experience, you will find that you have this inner strength that will give you this ability to actually stop drinking. And I believe that wholeheartedly. And do believe that it is a miracle, given what I was doing and how far gone I was and how close I was to losing the things that I was at risk of losing. It's amazing that I've been able to find my way back to a place where I can call it a more normal life. Not quite normal, and probably never will be. Okay, Bill, we've got a couple of minutes. I thought maybe you might want to have a few words for us, please.
Yeah, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic in New Jersey. Thanks a lot, Leo and Rob. You guys did a real good job today. This chapter can be a little bit confusing. And that basically what he's telling us here, what Bill's trying to get across to us, first thing we talked about was on page 19. The book is the program. The book is the solution. That's the point he's trying to get across there on page 19. And it tells us on the top of page 20, It says our very lives as ex-problem drinkers depend upon our constant thought of others and how we may help meet their needs. That's basically a reference to step 12. And I think Rob mentioned it. Nowhere in this book does it say this is a selfish program. And how can me thinking of other people and how I can help meet their needs be selfish? This book is going to later on tell us we have to get rid of our selfishness. Nowhere in this book does it say this is a selfish program. I don't know where that came from, but it's not a selfish program. And this book is also telling us, it's going to tell us, it says, we shall tell you what we have done. Nowhere in this book does it say we're going to tell you what you have to do. This book is telling us what the pioneers of AA did, the first people that came up with this process. And if we want what they got, we have to do what they did. That's up to us to decide whether or not we're going to do it. They're just going to point out to us what they did so that we can follow the same path if we want to. That's our own decision, our own choice. Then he talks about the real alcoholic on page 21, and he's making a reference to the cravings. Once we start drinking, we lose control of the amount that we drink. Then he gives us a description, basically, of what an alcoholic is, and that's only like a partial description because there could be more to it or whatever, but he's showing us different things that we do when we're drinking. We start drinking, we take one drink because we want to unwind, we want to relax, the phenomenon of cravings kicks in, and we wind up getting drunk, and then we act like Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, or whatever, and we go through all of those things. And then he gets into the mental part of the disease. After page 23, it doesn't talk about the physical part any longer. He's done talking about the cravings. Now the book is going to talk about the mental part, what's going on in our heads. And it tells us that the main problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind. Anybody that has any kind of an allergy, they don't sit around. Let's say somebody has an allergy to shrimp. They don't sit around and say, well, let me eat 2 sandwiches and then I can eat some shrimp. Or let me take the shrimp and mix it in with a glass of milk and then I can eat the shrimp. People with alcoholism do that kind of stuff. We don't, anybody else with any other kind of allergy, they say, hey, I'm allergic to that stuff. I got to stay away from it. I'm not going to touch it. People that have a peanut allergy don't sit around trying to figure out if they mix peanuts with milk or whatever, that they'll be able to eat them. But when it comes to alcohol, something in our brain short circuits. Whatever it is, whatever you want to call it, something goes wrong upstairs and it makes us drink against our will. And that doesn't happen to other people. And then he talks about, again, the same thing, the mental part. We've lost our power of choice in drinking. On page 24, it talks about that. If I had the power of choice and I could choose not to drink, I wouldn't need a daily reprieve, like it's going to tell us later on in the book that we have. My choice is gone. My choice, my control, my power is gone. Once you're powerless over alcohol, that means there's nothing you can do about it. You cannot choose not to drink. If you can choose not to drink, God bless you. I hope that works for you. This book tells me I cannot choose not to drink. No matter how hard I try, no matter what I use, I can't choose not to drink. And then the next paragraph, it talks about we can't think the drink through because the almost certain consequences that follow even taking a glass of beer do not crowd into the mind to deter us. That means I can't think the drink through. So if you can, that's wonderful. I hear people say they think the drink through all the time. That's great. I hope it works for you. That kind of stuff doesn't work for me because something in my brain short circuits and it makes me drink against my will. And then on page 25 where it says there is a solution, now he's telling us there's a way out of this. And basically what he's telling us in that paragraph, we need to go through steps 4 through 9. We just can't do 1, 2, 3. We have to do 4 through 9 in order to get through this and get any kind of a benefit out of it. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks a lot for letting me share.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Bill. All right. The way we close this out is with the Serenity Prayer, and then we will open it up for any questions or comments. Thank you. Rob?
Serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thank you, Leo. Great job.